If you want this video to actually help you, I want you to commit the next 15 minutes to your full attention, right? Maximize the screen of this video. Get out a piece of paper, something to write with, and I want you to just fully focus on this video. Have no distractions. And if you can't do that right now, watch this later at a time where you actually can. Because if you want to actually learn every single aspect of the SAT and how to master them and the strategy to actually get good so that you can start implementing this tomorrow and improve your score over the long run, you need to commit that kind of attention. I'm going to cover every single thing that you're going to need to know to start improving your score on the SAT. So hi, I'm Karthik, and this is the only SAT guide you're ever going to need to learn how to maximize your score. All right. So the first thing, right, and the most important thing arguably is your mindset, right? And I speak of mindset from a place that even though it seems that like I'm teaching you this thing and this thing is like somewhat distance away from me as much as it, like not as much as it might be from you, you have to understand that I was in your place before, right? I was also similarly in a position trying to increase my score. My first ever test was 400 points below what my target goal was and what my score. And I struggled for 1.5 years before I eventually got the score that I wanted. And something that I realized looking back is there were two main things that like almost withheld my progress. And once I started implementing them were the main things that drove my success, right? And that's effort and belief, right? I'm going to cover belief first because I think that's more important. If I could do it, right? I improved my score a significant amount and I got above the 1550 range. And if that's possible for me, right, then it's possible for you too, right? So that should give you the guarantee that what I say actually works. Believe that it's possible because I've done it, right? That is all the belief you really need. Because if there's someone in a similar position like you who is able to get what they want, then it's possible for you to do it as well, right? Now, going ahead with effort, right? You need to be able to get consistent in your preparation, right? And that might literally start out with you doing 15 minutes a day every single day. And if that's your definition of effort right now, that's totally fine. We're going to work on slowly increasing that amount that you do every single week. So one week it's 15 minutes. Maybe next week you bump it to 20 minutes. And eventually you're able to do long hour-long sessions, without even thinking too much, just getting right into it. So it's more important to focus on a daily routine than it is like how much you do in one day, right? Because it's doing it every day and doing it consistently that helps you learn significantly faster and, with less effort than just doing a lot in one day and having a long gap and then doing a lot the next day, right? It's about the total volume and how much up you're moving in terms of the amount that you're doing every day. So move up the volume of what you're doing and overload how much you're doing day to day, right? And here's one way that you can actually boost your score without learning anything new. And it's with this effort technique, but also with accountability, right? If you know a person that is doing the SAT, like make them your accountability partner. Tell them how much you want to do every day and talk to them daily about how much you actually did and what you learned, and they'll do the same. And not only are you going to be able to improve your score faster, but you're also going to be able to have that person as a reference for you, right? About how much they're doing. And on top of that, you can learn from them, they can learn from you, and you guys can be competitive in the nature that you're going to be able to improve, right? So having an accountability partner or just another person taking the SAT that you can talk with and is relatively have the same goals as you, that's going to instantly boost your score without actually learning anything. The competitive nature on top of the accountability is going to get you to do more than if you were just focusing on yourself, right? Okay, let's go into the actual strategy for every single section. It's going to go reading, grammar, and then math. And I'm going to break down strategy and learning and some of the skills and topics that you need to master, right? So for reading specifically, when you're making a strategy, right, and you're trying to figure out what's the best way to go about the test and go about learning pretty much, how you should stop focusing on copying an existing strategy online. So a lot of people are like, oh, don't fully read the passage, just skim it and then go ahead. And that might seem like, oh, that's like a much faster way to do it. But the gaps that you get from skimming instead of fully reading are significant, right? And a lot of the times that passages that people give an example of that they skimmed, they've actually deeply read beforehand. So it's actually hard for you to fully skim a passage and then get the full understanding. So every strategy has its ups and downs, but some, right, might work better for you personally more than other strategies, right? So don't focus on copying an existing strategy. Create your own strategy, just a baseline, and then I want you to modify it to the needs that you have, right? So what you're going to do, right? You're going to create a certain strategy for yourself, and or you're going to find one online, right? And I'll give you an example of one that I use, right? This is my strategy and it works for me the best, and you can copy it, but definitely modify it to your own strengths and weaknesses, right? So what I do is I do a full read of the passage initially, right? And my goal with that is to try to figure out where exactly all the main information is. I'm not focused on memorizing the information, but just where generally what the parts are, the main ideas of every paragraph. And that's how I keep my thoughts of thinking, right? And then once I encounter the questions, I go from my easiest to my hardest questions, and I focus on main idea last so that I can get a full understanding of the passage while I'm reading it. And also, every time the passage references a specific quotation or a specific line, I do a deep read on that line. So I get a full understanding of what happens. And also, when it doesn't reference a specific line, my initial read has helped me figure out where that part of the passage is. So I don't have to, go back and try to figure out where it is. I already know exactly where it is. So that's a strategy that I use. You need to adjust that based on what you are good at. And so some people like doing the skimming and then, doing another deep read. Some people like doing a full read and not really referencing the passage again. It just depends on what you do. And the only way to figure that out is to practice one strategy and then adjust it if it doesn't help you, right? Adjust it if you think that it's not as good, and then make some slight modification based on what you think could be improved, and test it again and do that a couple of times and then settle on a final strategy. And what you're going to do with that is you're going to just practice with that strategy and not adjust it again, right? Because practicing one strategy is going to be way more effective than using a different strategy every time you take the SAT, because then you never fully get a true understanding of what your best strategy is. And the fact that you constantly change it makes it so that you can't get better at the strategy, right? Because if you have a strategy that doesn't really work with you, but you have tons of experience with it, it's going to be way better than applying a new strategy that you just learned about and you're using it for the first time. You're always going to perform better with the one that you practice with. So understand that strategy isn't all too important, but pick the one that best works for you and actually practice it. Okay, so in terms of learning, right, what do we actually have to do to get better at learning, right? And for reading specifically, there isn't any explicit skill to reading, unlike grammar and unlike math, where there's specific skills and ways that you master them and then practice them for each of the sections. There isn't exactly one of that for reading. There's just different types of questions. So what we really have to do is just practice, right? And the SAT format makes these kinds of problems in a very specific way. So they follow an organized pattern, and when you see them test to test, they follow this like method, and you need to focus on that method. And how the only way that you do that is through practicing those kinds of problems, right? It's iterations of this entire process that I'm going to give you that's going to make you good, right? So the first thing that you're going to do, figure out where you struggle, right? And how you're going to do that is you're going to test yourself originally on just any sort of practice test, reading practice test, time yourself, but answer all the questions, even if you pass the time. And then what you're going to do is figure out the types of questions that you struggle with. Is it an evidence pair? Is it a specific kind of question? And you can use the SAT names for this question, but I prefer creating your own names and just figuring out what SAT category it correlates to, so you can better recognize it and understand it when it comes up. And what you're going to do from there is you're going to try to figure out why the correct answer is correct and why your answer was wrong, right? Every time when you take this test, and you're going to try to figure that out. And, you might need someone else to help you figure out the right reasoning for that kind of question and why it's wrong, but it's definitely possible to do yourself. It's just, it takes a lot more time and it's more difficult to try to find the exact reason if you're not given an explanation. And even if you are, right, on the SAT practice test, the explanations are often pretty poor. They're not that good, right? So build a strategy to not make that same mistake. So once you figure out why you get it wrong, you need to figure out what you can do next time to prevent that side of mistake. So create a strategy that's going to prevent that specific mistake from happening. And the strategy has to be extremely specific and actually have an actionable step, right? Something that you can actually perform in your next exam that's going to prevent you from making the mistake. And then see if you make the mistake again. See if that was the real problem. And if it wasn't, then you probably got the reason of why you missed the detail or why you got it wrong incorrect. And you need to figure out a new strategy for that. So in terms of grammar, right? What is the strategy for grammar? Well, before we discussed that there are explicit skills that are tested, and grammar is basically about knowing all of those skills, but then knowing the specific things that the SAT also likes that aren't specifically grammar, right? And I'll explain exactly what those are and why the SAT likes them. But once you know all of the basic skills and what the SAT is looking for, it's just a matter of refining the few that are not fully known to you, right? So you'll know all the skills and you'll test them, but you'll still get some questions wrong. And it's either for one of two reasons, right? One, you just don't fully understand the skill, right? You didn't fully master it beforehand and you don't know what specific part of the rule is being violated. Or you know the skill fully, but you just didn't recognize it in that context, or you didn't fully understand it, right? And basically how you get good at that, right, is what you're going to do is you're going to learn the skills that are involved and then literally just apply them, right? And if it's one that you didn't know, but if it's one that you did know but you got like slightly wrong, or you just didn't fully understand the context of where it was being applied, that is the one where you have to practice that kind of problem. So look online for resources of that kind of problem. You can use Khan Academy for this. It's extremely good. Just find out the specific skill and commit to practicing that, right? And you basically need to test to find out what you don't know. But the strategy for grammar is pretty simple. You basically just have to figure out the skills that you don't know and then just start applying them. And it all starts by understanding the fundamental skill and then applying, right? So in terms of the skills, right, these are the things that the SAT likes, the tested ideas, right? They often love to give you questions on relevance and purpose. It's like most of the exam is honestly has to do a lot with relevance and purpose, getting the proper word, right? That's word choice. And then redundancy is something that the SAT hates. So they love it when it's concise and it's grammatically correct. Transition sentences, using evidence and examples and using the right ones that give a proper conclusion. And same with evidence and examples of data, right? And this is a huge example of just all the grammatical ideas that could be there. And I don't recommend you just like go through every single one that I put on this list. Use Khan Academy to actually go through all of the skills, right? It's pointless for me to explain all of them to you when there's a free, stronger, more powerful resource out there that you can do on your own time. Okay. In terms of learning, when you make mistakes, right? I already explained the types of mistakes that you're going to do, but again, here's a framework that you can apply for that, right? So do you know what you missed, and can you explicitly name the skill that you missed, right? And if you're unable to do that, right, you basically have to review the skill, and that's going to be from finding an online resource that just explains the skill, or just knowing someone who knows the skill or is good at the SAT, and then like just getting help from them, right? If you know the concept, figure out why it's wrong, right? And if you don't know the concept exactly, right? Because you know the concept behind the skill, but you don't know exactly what the concept is, you need to practice that problem type and figure out why you got it wrong, right? Create a specific strategy for figuring out that, okay, this problem is testing this kind of skill, or the specific thing that you missed and how you're going to prevent that next time. And then you just need to retest this, right? There's a common theme between every single section, and it's just a matter of figuring out what your mistakes are, why they're made, making a strategy for not doing them, and repeating that cycle thousands of times. That's how you get a good score, right? Okay, so in terms of math, again, it's based on the skills that you practiced, right? It's what you already know about math and what you don't already know. So if you literally just learn all the skills that are in math, you can instantly boost your score as a result, right? Examples that are going to be more difficult, right? They rely on the fact that you know the skill, but the way that they've phrased it is different. So it's very similar to grammar, to which if you just know the skill, you're going to know the problem. And if you don't know the skill, that's the main thing you should be focusing on, is figuring out exactly what I need to do to solve it, right? And how you're going to do this instead of actually learning the skill, right? Which is what you should be doing if you're learning the skill. But while test taking, right, if you don't have the chance to learn the skill externally and you're actually taking your exam, this is what you're going to do. You're going to break apart what you do know and what you don't know. You're going to separate them into knows and don't knows in pieces of information, and you're going to try to solve for as much don't knows as possible and use the answer choices and the context of the question to try to figure out more and more as you've listed them explicitly, right? And that's going to help you either actually solve the problem or make the best educated guess that you possibly can, right? That's basically the strategy for problems that you don't know, and obviously problems that you do know that you don't need to like make something for that, except if you make a careless mistake. And the only way to prevent that is by practicing that kind of problem more. I say this analogy a lot, but the 2 plus 2 analogy works here. If When was the last time you made a mistake doing simple addition? Probably never. Or maybe it was when you were just started learning it. And the reason why that doesn't happen is because we've practiced that so much. We've practiced basic addition so much to the extent we don't have to worry about it, and we can always get it right, even if it's formatted in a different weird problem, right? So treat that the same way that you do careless mistakes on this exam. You're going to treat it in the way that you're going to fully understand that concept by practicing it a bunch of times and not make careless mistakes. Okay, in terms of learning, right? Again, it's similar to grammar. You just need to figure out what you do know and what you don't know, and that comes from the practice exams, right? Take a practice exam, figure out what concepts you know and what concepts you don't know, and go to Khan Academy. Learn all the ones that you don't know. Watch videos on them. Watch how they're solved and what parts you do know, what parts you don't know. Take notes and actually learn that, right? But when it comes to increasingly complex versions, there's not that much new information that you need to figure out, right? It's going to be the same thing generally. And all you need to do is just figure out exactly what portions that you don't know, right? From there, just identify everything, relearn the skills. But if it's just a hard problem and you know every single one of the skills, but you just couldn't figure out to apply it, you just need to practice more of those problems, right? There's no easy answer to this. It literally comes down to practicing and knowing if you know the skill or not. Okay, so these are a list. It's a huge list of every single skill that's tested, but this isn't a conclusive list. There might be a couple of more skills that are tested that I haven't put here. And honestly, just go to Khan Academy or just go to the SAT website. They have a list of literally everything that could be more accurate and more detailed than I could ever put on this slide. Okay, so here's the final formula, right? And I'm going to tell you a story of a student that I had. They struggled in reading a lot, and they didn't exactly know how to improve. They didn't know what they needed to do to improve, and they didn't know if they were improving, right? And after 4 weeks of me applying their strategy, they improved 120 points and got into the 1550 range, right? And so how exactly did they do it, right? So they created a routine of practicing, and I helped them do that by understanding like that they had to do the work before they came to the session. So it created this emphasis and this accountability to actually do the certain work before we did our tutoring, right? Because it was reliant on them doing the work for us to actually do the tutoring, right? And on top of that, every time they got a question wrong, which we would go over in our sessions, I gave them advice on why the reason for why the mistake was potentially made. And they would run me through how they were thinking. And that helped me realize why they got it wrong. And I explained to them the right way. And on top of that, I gave them customized practice based on their mistakes, right? So my idea was, how can I make this accessible for everybody? How can I get everybody to be able to get this experience, right? And that's why I launched my private community, right? And what you're basically going to be able to access there are live calls and lectures. And there's going to be on multiple different time zones. So you can join almost like 1 to 2 every single week at the minimum. And you can be able to attend all of them if you're in the right time zone, right? So you're going to be able to attend most of the sessions, but they're also going to be recorded and posted so you can access them if you're inside the community, just in case you miss one, right? And I'll be making notes on them that you can visibly see, right? On top of that, you're going to be able to get accountability, right? Before coming to the session, there's homework that you have to do. And if you don't complete that, then you miss out on the lecture pretty much. You're not able to get the most of it. So it creates this pressure and this accountability from me, but also from other people in the session, right? Other people in the group. They're going to help you stay accountable. You can even meet some people and become an accountability partner for someone, and that'll help you stay more accountable, right? And you're going to get access to any future courses that I'm going to make. And on top of that, like a lot of questions that I get actually by email is about college admissions and about like how that exactly works. So I'm going to explain everything about college admissions and how you get into top schools, right? On top of that, there's this idea that like, you can get prep and get all of this, right? But the problem with prep is that it's actually extremely expensive for the amount of hours that you put in, right? You only get 1 hour a week or 2 hours a week, and you're paying about anywhere from like $35 to like $100 an hour for prep, right? With my community, it's priced at $100 a month. So you can get almost 20 to 25 sessions a month for just $100. And you can also get access to me 24/7. I'll be responding to posts inside of the community and everything that you could possibly need answered, right? You can just create a post and other students and I can answer it. And if you want access, click the first link down in the description. And I hope you guys learned something today.